Hello and welcome to the Closer's Playbook, a podcast about selling your services as a freelancer. I'm Pete Beber here with Tyler Poole.
How you doing, Pete?
Good, Tyler. How are you?
Good, man.
Yeah. So we want to do something a little bit different today. We're gonna do like a mini series on new versus existing clients. Really focused on working with existing clients,
Right.
but new versus existing. And I think we just wanted to kind of set a baseline, right?
Sure.
Why? Generally speaking, it's a lot easier to keep an existing customer, than it is to get a new customer. Tyler, you do a lot of prospecting. I do prospecting. What are your thoughts on going after new business? Does that resonate with you?
100%. Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, it just goes back to almost like human psychology where we're resistant to change in almost every facet of our life. Change is hard. Change is not good. And, well, not necessarily not good, but it's hard. We have to force ourselves outside of our comfort bubble. So if I'm working with client, XYZ, and we've been working together for 6 months, we've got a relationship. He knows how I work. I would know how he works. And there's a foundation there where it's just easier to continue.
I think a big part is trust, right?
Yeah.
With an existing customer, hopefully you've built up some trust with them, and so that's why they're willing to, write the check for your work, and to have you, especially in a B2B setting, right? Your work is going to impact their image, their brand, their company. With somebody who you've never worked with, there's no trust, and I think. Also, at the same time, just in general, people might be a little distrusting of salespeople.
100%. And especially, I can't speak to most other industries, but I know for digital marketers, whether you're selling SEO like myself or Facebook ads or whatever, there are a lot of people sending emails or, LinkedIn posts and try this new method of whatever customer acquisition and especially for people selling courses. Like I see it all the time where I'm like, a YouTube ad will pop on and say, "Are you tired of SEO and this and this? Facebook ad is the only answer. I'll teach you how." And like we see so much of this stuff. Well, business owners aren't any different. Like they get spammed pitches for new services all the time, and so standing out from that crowd, but then gaining a trust of a business owner or the trust of a business owner is tough where, to standing out from the crowd and distinguishing yourself as not just another marketer.
Right. And like for me, if I think about trust, like when I see those ads where it's like, this is the only thing, my BS meter goes off, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, how can you know that this is what's going to work? Yeah, how can you know this is going to work for my business? You don't even know me or my business.
100%.
And so if I put myself in the shoes of the buyer, this is one of the reasons why we talk so much about discovery, right? Discovery helps you build trust. You're asking questions to find out if you can help them and then making that clear to them. But you got to get to the point where you can have the conversation. And to do that, you have to do advertising, you have to have word of mouth, you have to have some sort of presence. There could be referrals. You don't have to have any one of those, but you have to have some way to get new customers. And realistically, sitting idle is not going to get you new customers. So it takes work.
And look at it from a time perspective. I mean, maybe it's obvious what the difference between new and existing is, but look at it from a time perspective. I may spend 3 hours sending emails or prospecting or whatever for one new client, or maybe even one new lead, where I don't spend any time at all for that existing customer. Exactly. To get him to re-up. I hopefully am doing a good job and putting in the work necessary to continue that business. But other than normal day-to-day work, I'm not doing anything additional for that customer.
Right. And I think like that time spent, prospecting, it's huge, but it's also something a lot of people don't think about. When you think about their business, they think about how many hours can I work on project work, but then all of a sudden you have to go get more customers. We talk, in sales roles about having a pipeline. That's having a pipeline, having a funnel. It's going to take so many conversations to lead to a new customer. To get those conversations, it's going to take so many either ads or referrals or emails or phone calls. So it's really a funnel. It's like, here I'm starting really wide, right, and then I'm going to narrow it down, and it takes time to do that, and it takes effort, and there's a lot of techniques for getting new customers. I would say I'm not really a pro at that. I work with people who are really good at it, which helps me. But it is something that takes a lot of time, and effort.
100%.
And if you think about it, maybe like those who are doing like content creation, they're a little bit more creative. So if you're a content creator as a freelancer, maybe your emails are going to look better than somebody who's not focused on creating content. So you have to think about, where are my strengths, where are my weaknesses. Obviously, there's freelance sites where you can find work as well, but even that takes effort.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So
100%. There's no easy way to get new clients. Like it just, we'll talk about one of the episodes that we have coming up is referrals, and that's the easiest way, and that's still not easy. So there really is no easy way to get new clients or to prospect for them. It all takes time. It all is essentially almost boils down to a numbers game, and you can influence that number. Like, let's say I close 1% of my leads. Okay, so I could increase the number of leads I have, or I could get better at sales by listening to a certain podcast, and hopefully improve that conversion rate to, let's say, 2, 3, 5%, whatever it is. But it's still, it's at some point it's a numbers game where there's no such numbers game with the existing customer.
Yeah, the existing customer is going to be, you've already worked so hard to get them. Right. So you need to kind of work really hard to keep them. Right. But they're going to pay you while you're keeping them, which is a key difference between getting a new customer and working with an existing. Now, I generally feel like I want to keep a customer for as long as possible, because they're already paying me. We have a relationship. We're doing the work.
Is there any scenario in which you would cut off an existing customer?
I mean, if they were abusive, right? And I mean, like they are calling me at all hours. They might be, verbally abusive or treating me poorly. Like, it's a relationship, right? Sure. And I like to set that from the beginning. Like, hey, I'm here to work with you to accomplish the goals that we're setting out. But if somebody is just a jerk, it's probably not worth my time. Another is, if you've got a contract, and depending on the work that you do, right? If you have a contract and like that project comes to a close, then it's going to naturally come to a close. Like, if they don't need that services anymore, it was a finite project. Okay, there's some other thoughts I have there, but like, what comes to mind?
How would you those other thoughts that you have, like, what would you do? This is a good thing. Let's say you have a contract for 6 months. Yeah. It's up, and the service that you've provided is such that they don't need it anymore.
Yeah.
How would you what would you do there?
If it was coming to a close, I'd make sure we close out. We have like a closing call where we talk about the project. I get feedback from them, right? How did the project go from your perspective? What could I have done better? What could we have cut out from your perspective? And what other things would you have liked to see from me? Maybe services, or maybe like communication. Sort of like survey them, right? Get their
What
feedback.
About selling them a new service?
If you have other services to offer, then absolutely. But I would be priming that before that came to a close.
Perfect. Because I mean, like, you have that trust, especially if that project's gone well. Take advantage of that, or this is something we'll talk about in a few episodes, or ask for referrals.
Yeah.
So, I agree with you that it takes a lot to want to part ways with an existing customer. But I'm actually, it's funny that we're recording this today because I'm actually seriously considering parting ways with a customer. We're recording this on a Saturday morning. At 10 o'clock last night, I was reloading and rebooting a site that had some issues. That's not in my contract. That is not something that I signed up for. Website maintenance is not a service that I sell. And here I am, 10 o'clock on a Friday night selling it. So,
Tyler, we had a earlier podcast where we talked about change orders, being really specific in your contracts. I know this is a customer you've had for a while, and this is before you had them prior to this. So, yeah.
Well, it's funny because this customer came at the beginning of we're recording this at April 2021. I had to think about what month it was. We're recording this April 2021, and this was one of the first customers that I got as things started to pick back up from the COVID pandemic, and so like many people, my business took a hit during that, and I lost a lot of clients. And so looking back at it now, it's easy to look at all the things we've already talked about and how I kind of skipped some steps because this was, at the time, it was a new client and it was
looking for cash flow.
Right, looking for cash flow, and it was something that I hadn't been getting leads. My conversion rate was really down, like a lot of people, and so now I'm looking back at all the things that we've talked about that I skipped in the sales process, and I'm like,
I mean, I still make those mistakes.
Everybody, I
nobody bats 1,000.
Exactly, right. And there's always hindsight's 20/20, right?
Yeah, so of course, a lot of the learnings come from the hindsight.
But
typically.
yeah, but it is possible to want to get rid of an existing customer, like
So you have a couple options. You could say, hey, I think that the work that you're asking me for is outside of the scope of what I'm really capable of, and I'm not the best person to do that. That can be a trust earner, because you're saying like, hey, I have limitations,
right,
and it's going to be harmful potentially to your business if you have me doing these things that you're asking for.
Yep.
Like, I think too, a lot in the tech space, people associate, like, if like you do search engine optimization, to a lot of people, business owners who are not in a tech field, they might think that means everything about websites, about servers, all of these things, right? Hosting. It's not necessarily the case. So it could be an opportunity to level set and say, what I did Friday night, really outside the scope of what my capabilities are. I was a little bit even learning on the fly. I wanted to help you out, but I think that in the future we need to stick to my core competencies.
Well, and not only that, but I'm going to sell it as such. I've already thought about this a little bit, and I'm going to present it like this. I'm going to be like, that is not something that was in the original scope of work, and the hours that I put towards that are going to come out of the hours that I'm supposed to be working for you. And so, like, especially with SEO, the hour and a half that I spent on website maintenance, I could have been building backlinks or improving existing content or creating new content. Or things that,
to be fair, at 10 o'clock on a Friday night,
I would have been drinking beer.
It's you're being asked to do something outside of the scope of work and outside of it. Like normally, after hours tech support costs more,
right?
And so I did it to help out, but I realized that's not my core competency. Right. We really if you know somebody who does that sort of thing, then you could say, I can refer you.
Well, and this is something that is talked about in Never Split the Difference. That's not fair. Use the word fair.
It's also not fair to him to expect like, hey,
he's not only is he not getting the best out of my services by spending time on something that is not in the contract, but it's not fair to me to have to work at 10 o'clock on a Friday night.
Right. It's not, for several reasons, but you could use this as an opportunity to say, like, let's just take a step back, because it's also possible that maybe he could pay somebody less to do that work
easily.
Right. And so looking out for you and your business, having me do that, I probably shouldn't have done that. Right. I probably should have referred you to somebody else, because it's going to take me longer to do those things, because that's not my core competency. I'm almost having to learn on the fly a little bit, but I wanted to help out because we've built this partnership.
Right.
And so you can, part of like never, I don't know if it's never split the difference necessarily, but for me, it's like, hey, this is a relationship, like it's two-way. Mm-hmm. And so let's just make sure you understand where my core competencies are, because something like that really should have gone somewhere else, and it probably would have been more cost effective for you. What I don't want is for you to be paying somebody with not that as their core competency, potentially more than you could have paid, and potentially somebody who could have gotten it done quicker for you.
Right.
So let's just reset on what I'm here to do and why that is. I'm thinking of you and your business when I talk to you about it. It's not that I don't want to do the work. It's that it's not where I totally shine.
100%.
So that's probably how I would reset that. It is in his benefit.
100%.
To have somebody who's focused on that. And it's also to your benefit.
Right.
So, and then, now you've sort of reset. You haven't, maybe that does end the relationship, right? Right. But maybe it makes the relationship better.
Right. And maybe more productive, more successful,
Yeah.
I think it's funny. I mean, I think we started talking about new and existing clients, and I think this episode turned into how to work with an existing client. But it's an important skill to have, and it does fit this theme.
Right. And now now when you go back, you've reset expectations, right? So now we're at baseline. And then if he comes back to you later and says, hey, I need this, you can say, hey, this is outside my core competency. Now you have reference that you can go back to and say, hey, remember how we talked about this? I think it would be in your best interest to use somebody else for this.
Yeah.
And how do you argue with that, right? It's like, hey, I'm trying to look out for you, because it's not like, if that happened at 2:00 on a Tuesday, then you're probably not like as upset about it, maybe, or versus 10:00 on a Friday night. But you also might have...
But there's an underlying problem that he is coming to... And this is not just this specific thing. This is something that, we talked about a few weeks ago. But when a client feels like they can come to you for everything, or a lot of things that are outside the scope of the project that was already established, that needs to be addressed. And, you can do it... we've already talked about ways to do it, but like it needs to be addressed, and the quicker that you address it, and the better you address it, it sets a precedence for how you can handle that situation in the future.
So maybe we can wrap up here, because this is going to lead me to referrals.
Okay.
But when you are trusted by a customer, and they're coming to you for more and more stuff that might be outside of your scope, building a network of people who you trust, who do those things that you're being asked for, can be a great way to build a referral network.
So let's cut there. And that is a preview of an episode, I think, 2 weeks from now. So stay tuned, come back, follow us on,
Yeah, we'll see if it's 2 weeks or next week. Maybe we'll reorder, since it could flow a little bit better. We'll see. We'll try it out. We're just riffing here.
There you go.
But yeah, so now when you start to find people who are good in different areas, and you start to build relationships with those people, that can be really powerful. We'll talk about that more in the episode on referrals.
Perfect. All right. Well, hope you enjoyed the episode, and hopefully we didn't skew off topic too bad there. But
hopefully it's helpful.
Catch you guys next week.
Yeah. Thanks, Tyler.
Thanks, Pete.